Spain's Sammy Sanchez is in second place going into the second to last day of the Vuelta a España. He'll be looking to gain time on the lead in today's individual time trial. Ivan Basso is one spot behind and hoping to protect his podium position in one of his weaker disciplines. And that's because Aussie Cadel Evans is only 14 seconds behind and is one of the best time trialists left in the entire field here at the Vuelta. But the overall race lead is firmly in the hands of Castapar's Alejandro Valverde. He leads by almost a minute and a half with 2 days left to go. A solid time trial in stage 20 will basically secure his first ever Grand Tour victory. It is the penultimate day of the 64th Vuelta a España in the central Spanish town of Toledo today, 70 kilometers south of the Spanish capital of Madrid, where the race will end tomorrow. And this individual time trial, essentially 28 kilometers long, and there's a small 2-kilometer climb in the second half of the course, but overall it's mostly flat, not terribly technical, and rather short for the final time trial of a Grand Tour. The map here making it look much longer than it really is, just topping out at 27.8 kilometers specifically. Starting, ending, and traveling through the town of Toledo on this penultimate day of the final Grand Tour of the season. And this was earlier. Garmin Slipstream's David Miller, the 59th rider to take the start out of 139 riding today. And Miller coming into the race today saying that he wanted to win this time trial, putting in a massive effort and coming through with the best time at that moment by 43 seconds. It is a time that still stands as we come on the air as the top time so far today. Miller, one of the best time trialists here in Toledo today and one of only 4 Garmin Slipstream riders left in the field. Now, right now, you are looking at Karsten Kroon out on the road. He was the 68th rider to start, and the riders going in 1-minute intervals at this point, still early in the race, and Kroon coming up on the second of 2 checkpoints on the course. This is at 19.5 kilometers. The first one is at 10K into the race, and of course the finish line at 27.8. As we welcome you to our coverage of stage 20. Of the 2009 Vuelta a España here on Universal Sports. Steve Schlanger, Todd Gogulski. Perfect day for a time trial. Sunny skies, temperature right around 70 degrees, and go-go, quite a contrast to the first 2 time trial efforts that these riders had to go through earlier in the Vuelta. In the prologue on day 1, raining, a lot of wind, very nasty weather up in the Netherlands, and then on stage 7 it was also raining in the individual time trial in the Netherlands. Gustavo Cesar now, a winner of a stage earlier.
And really, this is a welcome change for these guys, what they've had to battle through. The nasty rain conditions, the mountains, the cold, and the very severe heat have all battled these riders and beat them down. That, as well as the crashes that we've seen, have taken their toll on these riders. So they'll be very happy to have pleasant conditions today.
This is Matty Lloyd of the Silence Lotto team, a guy who was looking after Cadel Evans most of the way before Evans' tire puncture in the big mountains earlier in the Vuelta really doomed his chances of an overall win. Now Evans coming into the day 4th on the general classification, hoping to move up and get a podium spot, and certainly well within reason considering his time trial abilities. This is Gustavo Dominguez of the Jacobeo Galicia team coming towards the finish, and Dominguez going to have at the moment a top 20 time, but almost 2:20 behind the best time right now of David Miller, who really crushed this course the way he said he would. Really focused on this time trial, wanting a win. And Miller rode like it earlier today and has a time that is going to be very tough to beat, even though he started relatively early compared to the favorites with so many other riders still to go. Miller has posted a tough time for everybody else to try and take down.
Well, Miller is definitely focused on this time trial. He wants to medal at the World Championships, which incidentally will also be bringing to everybody on Universal Sports later in this week. And it really is a situation where, because he was out of the general classification and most of his team is out of the bike race, he's been able to rest a little bit coming into this time trial. And so that will help him to put in a better ride compared to some of the other general classification men who have battled through everything the last couple of days.
Juan Manuel Garate starting now, the Rabobank rider, same team as Robert Haysink, who really had probably the worst day of his entire Vuelta yesterday when he lost several minutes. He started yesterday's stage half a minute back of the overall race leader Alejandro Valverde, but he's been hurting the last couple of days because of a crash in the final week, and it's really blown up any chances of the young Dutchman finishing on the podium. As Garate starts on the very wide, flat roads here in Toledo. And as I said at the top, most of this course, Gogo, is pretty flat and the roads are well paved. They'll be on a freeway for a portion of the course today. And there is that climb in the back half that's 2 kilometers long. Some of these guys may struggle with it, even though it's not a big climb overall. Yeah,
it's not a rated type of climb, but certainly the first 2/3 of this course does undulate. And Rain Terame here, one of the men we saw factoring into an early breakaway before he completely imploded on a very steep climb, losing 9 minutes in the final couple of kilometers.
Well, the riders, of course, starting in reverse order of their standing on general classification. That means Alejandro Valverde, our race leader, will be the last man out of the start house. He'll be preceded by Sammy Sanchez, second on the GC at 1:26 back. Ivan Basso just before Sanchez, and then Evans and Mosquera before those 3 riders. So the top 5 on the GC separated by 2:11. They'll be the last 5 out of the start house as we continue here in the time trial from Toledo.
The 2009 Vuelta a España is being brought to you by AT&T, your world delivered. And by MGD64, a tasty contradiction.
Final weekend of racing at the Vuelta a España. There is Ezequiel Mosquera warming up for his individual time trial effort. Right now, 5th on the general classification coming into the day. 2 minutes, 11 seconds behind Alejandro Valverde. Once they get down to the final 5 to take the start today, it'll go Mosquera, followed by Evans, Basso, Sanchez, and then Valverde. They'll all be separated by 2-minute intervals. As the early starters go in 1-minute intervals, you get down to the final 20, and then it goes up to 2-minute intervals between the riders. And this is Tadej Valjevets of the AG2R team, one of the many squads still yet to win a stage here at this year's Vuelta a España. And when you look at the big picture of this final weekend, Todd Gugulski, for Alejandro Valverde, he's not going to win this time trial today. He just wants to limit his losses. He has a lot of time to work with in terms of his advantage over his main rivals. Just about 1.5 minutes over everybody, if not more. So he can concede some time and still be in good shape. But the other guys are not only looking to take back time, but they're also starting to formulate their plans to try and get on the podium. They know the overall victory is just about out of reach, so it's now about how do you get into those 2nd and 3rd spots to get on the podium here at this Grand Tour.
Yeah, the podium battle is very close for 2nd and 3rd because we have only a handful of seconds separating Sammy Sanchez, who's in 2nd, Ivan Basso, who's in 3rd, and Cadel Evans, who's in 4th. And everybody pretty much assumes Cadel Evans is the best time trialist of the 3, and Basso is the least accomplished time trialist. So Basso's really in the hot seat right now because he comes into the day only 14 seconds in front of Cadel Evans.
This is the 3rd race against the clock we've had at this Spanish Grand Tour this year. Prologue on the first day was under 5 kilometers, but each of these last 2 individual time trials have been comparable in terms of distance, right inside of 30K altogether. As we take you up to the finish of Roman Kreuziger of the Liquid Gas team, putting in a pretty good ride. David Miller still holding the best time at just inside of 36 minutes altogether. Kreuziger goes outside of that, but he could find himself safely inside the top 5.
Well, Kreuziger is a very accomplished time trialist, and he's certainly putting in a very good ride here. He's lost the first place here to David Miller, but he's not too far out of it. And he actually has finished in this exact same spot to David Miller a couple years back in 2007 in the prologue of Paris-Nice that Miller won, and he ended up 2nd on.
So Kreuziger in 2nd place now, but 30 seconds back of Miller, and what that is a very good illustration of just how dominating a performance Miller has put in. 2nd place, and you're still 30 seconds back.
Yeah, Miller's very, very accomplished in the time trial discipline. He's won numerous time trial stages of the Grand Tours, that being France, Italy, and Spain, where we are today.
And there is Alejandro Valverde in the golden kit, warming up on the trainer. He'll be the last man down the start ramp today, knowing that if he can avoid any sort of disaster, that he will basically have it locked up going into Madrid tomorrow. As we take you back to the start ramp, Edvard Vorganov. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier about this being the second of the individual time trials at more distance, if you want to use the first one as a barometer, stage 7 in Valencia, it was almost the same length as the one we have here today in Toledo, just inside of 30 kilometers altogether. And on that stage 7, it was Sammy Sanchez among the top GC riders who had the best time. He finished 18 seconds ahead of Valverde. Cadel Evans was 3 seconds ahead of Valverde and 15 seconds behind Sanchez. Basso basically about a minute behind Sammy Sanchez. So it's certainly a case where we know that Valverde, coming into this final individual time trial, will probably not have the best time among those top riders, but he can certainly limit his losses to a place where it's not going to affect his overall position.
And this man right here, David Herrero, actually was 4th in that time trial and really surprised a lot of people. We'll see if he can repeat that type of performance here. He's been very active throughout this 3 weeks of racing, and really his entire Jacobeo Galizia team has been very active. They've got Ezequiel Mosquera riding for the general classification, but Herrero here has been active in the individual stages.
It really doesn't look like today's time trial is going to shake up the general classification, but coming into the Vuelta, there was some concern by the better time trialists like a Cadel Evans that the time trials weren't long enough. All of them under 30 kilometers, and that's sort of unusual for a Grand Tour. Typically, they have at least one that's much longer.
Yeah, it's really not, this race has not been one where the time trialists knew that they were going to be gaining a big advantage in the time trials, because just over 60 kilometers in total for time trialing in this entire Vuelta, and that's quite short for the historic, what we've seen in the history of these races. I mean, even in the Giro d'Italia earlier this year, we had one time trial that was longer than all 3 of the time trials combined in this year's Vuelta.
There's Sammy Sanchez, second on the GC, but 126 behind his fellow Spaniard Alejandro Valverde. Where will Sanchez finish today as he warms up for his time trial in Toledo here in stage 20? We bring you back to Toledo, Spain, just about 70 kilometers south of Madrid, former capital of the Spanish Empire, and last year hosted a point-to-point stage finish of the Vuelta, this year hosting the individual time trial on the second to last day. And a sunny day it is, with a very comfortable 70-degree temperature right now. Michael Cherel of the Française des Jeux team next to go here in the TT, as opposed to the rain we saw in the prologue and in the first time trial. A welcome change here with sunny skies and dry roads all around for the riders today.
Well, we can see his team car coming out from the staging area right next to the start house, and every rider does have that car that travels right behind them with the team mechanic and the manager. And this is Tadej Valjevec, who is another rider on the AG2R La Mondiale squad out here on the course, and hasn't had his best Grand Tour over these last 3 weeks, but certainly, you know, it's the way these guys are sometimes. It's a long season, and sometimes you miss sort of your timing of your form. But we see at the 10-kilometer point, the first time check, Philippe Gilbert, the Silence Lotto rider, has put in the best time so far. He's a man who is a very aggressive type of racer, and he has certainly shown that in the first 10 kilometers. I would expect him to fade just a little bit as this wears on.
Yeah, some guys can go out strong but cannot sustain it over the entire distance. And again, the checkpoints are at 10 kilometers and 19.5 before you get to the finish at 27.8. Remember that time trial in Valencia, we saw a variety of riders have the best time at that early time check, but at the end of the day, it was Fabian Cancellara who pretty much blew everybody away to win that individual time trial at the line because he was just so consistent.
And for the most part, that's what we're going to see in these time trials that are longer than a prologue. Anything that's more than 5 or 6K, it's pretty typical that the best time trialists will start just a little bit conservative and ride into it because you don't want to blow yourself up at the beginning. This is Christophe Riblon here, approaching the 19.5 kilometer time check, and currently sitting in the 8th spot. You can see that he crossed that 40 seconds behind. And the man setting the best time there at that spot is David Miller.
It's always interesting when you come down this late in a Grand Tour to one of the final stages, and it is a time trial, guys, with so many different ambitions as we come back to Tadej Valjevets right now, the team leader on GC for AG2R. Some guys like Miller have such that singular focus of trying to win, so they put in a blistering effort. Other guys are trying to consolidate their positions as Philippe Gilbert comes across the line here. And he did lose some time, but good enough for third right now at just beyond a half minute back of Miller's best time. So the leader at the first checkpoint did fade as we would have suspected over the rest of the course, but hanging on for a top 3 right now.
You can see all over his face and his body, he is absolutely depleted as he comes to the line, not even looking back at the clock. This looks like Bram Tankink of Rabobank out on the course now, and really a depressing day for that entire squad as we saw almost the entire team drop out of the lead group and waiting for their overall leader, Robert Haysink. And Lars Boom now coming to the finish. He's had a terrific Vuelta a España.
Winner of a stage and been out in some breakaways as well. Lars Boom, former cyclocross world champion, now transferring to the road discipline, and it's been quite a fluid transfer so far. Boom trying to hang on to a top 10 placing here as the clock goes over 37 minutes into his ride today. It's going to go just beyond top 10. Now Lars Boom coming in, not really pushing the clock here. He'll finish 124 back of Miller, and an 11th place finish for the man from Rabobank, Lars Boom. But it is David Miller of Garmin Slipstream, currently the leader here in the Stage 20 individual time trial here at the Vuelta. Vasily Kiriyenka of the Kesteparn team beginning his time trial as he rolls down the start ramp, one of the top supporters of teammate and overall race leader Alejandro Valverde over the last 3 weeks for this Kesteparn team that's had to work extremely hard, probably harder than they've had to work all season long, to protect the golden jersey, because Valverde today now wearing it for the 11th straight day. That's a lot of time to wear it, from the moment when you first slip it over your shoulders to the time that you're going to actually win the race. And a lot of pressure falls on a team when you hold it so many days in a row.
Kiriyenka's been a great addition to this squad as well, Steve. This is his first year on the Kesteparn team, and he's been one of the key men in the mountains for that team, along with Joaquim Rodriguez, and certainly they've been very helpful for their team leader. But he also was 5th place in the time trial in stage number 4, back when the legs were probably quite a bit fresher than today, and we'll see if he actually is given the go-ahead to ride full speed in this race, or if they want him to save it just in case something nasty happens tomorrow. Ivan Basso here getting ready for a very critical time trial in what tends to be the weakest link of his stage racing discipline. He's a good climber, he's a solid roadie, but when it comes to the time trial, he just seems to be lacking that little something.
Well, you better have some pretty thumping tunes on that iPod right now to get him jacked up, because he should be extremely nervous trying to hang on to a podium today. Coming into stage 20, 3rd on the GC, but only 14 seconds ahead of 4th place, and that is Cadel Evans, who is a substantially better time trialist than Basso. So for Ivan to hang on to at least 3rd and keep that podium, it's going to be extremely difficult with Evans breathing down his back.
And he really wanted to put a lot of emphasis on this race. He had 2 major focuses for the entire season. The first one was his home Grand Tour, the Giro d'Italia. We saw there He ended up 5th place overall, but he ended up actually working for his teammate Franco Pellizotti, who finished on the podium in 3rd place. He didn't ride the Tour de France. He's back now for the Vuelta, his 2nd objective for the season. He really wants that podium spot come tomorrow in Madrid.
And Gustavo Cesar, pretty good time at the 2nd interval, only 12 seconds behind the best time. And David Miller posting the best time at the 2nd interval and at the finish line, where he is our current leader right now. But Cesar really making a name for himself here. After winning a stage earlier in the Vuelta, now strong time trial here on the 2nd to last day as we take you back to Kirienka now. Now, we do not expect this final time trial on the penultimate day of the Vuelta to be that all decisive in terms of shaping the general classification, but on more than one occasion throughout the Vuelta's history, this last time trial has really proven to shake things up. As you see the standings at the 1st interval with Philippe Gilbert holding the best time there, and that's of course at 10 kilometers. Go back to 2002, you might remember Aitor Gonzalez won the final time trial in Madrid, taking the yellow jersey from Roberto Heras to win the Vuelta on the final day. Same situation the year before in 2001. Oscar Sevilla lost the race by less than a minute when Angel Casero rode a much better time trial in the final stage. So we have seen this final TT really prove decisive here at the Vuelta before. However, today, it looks like it'll just be a battle for the podium that will be decided here in Toledo.
But it's really a crushing blow to a rider to lose that jersey so late in the race. And of course, at the same time, it's a fabulous feeling of elation for that guy who peels that jersey off the back of the guy who's been wearing it. So for every victory, you know, there's some sorrow, and for every sorrow, there's somebody else who's very happy about their performance, and this is Jesus Hernandez, one of our Astana riders, and boy, they've been through a tough race so far with some of the losses that team has had, and one of the big ones we really miss is the American Chris Horner, who once again injured in a Grand Tour, and really a tough season for him.
A lot of turmoil surrounding the Astana team. It began earlier this year with the announcement of Lance Armstrong coming back to ride the Giro, and then of course the tension between him and Contador at the Tour de France. Now, will Contador stay with Astana? Will he jump to another team? Johan Brunel has left Astana, not under the best of circumstances. Vinokurov is now back with that club, so a lot of turbulence for the Astana team here throughout the 2009 season. Cadel Evans has also had a lot of turbulence as well, but hoping that a good time trial here today in Toledo will move him up at least one spot. 4th on the GC coming in, but could very well find himself in the top 3 when the day ends. So the Aussie loosening up on the trainer here. He'll be the 4th to last out of the start house here today as the time trial continues on stage number 20. Stage number 20. The individual time trial at the Vuelta rolls along. This is Jaimar Zubeldia of the Astana team. One of 3 GC captains that they brought to this Vuelta, along with Chris Horner and Alexander Vinokurov. Vino has since dropped out after losing a lot of time earlier in the Vuelta. And that was after Chris Horner broke his hand on the big crash in Liège, Belgium on stage number 4. So that left only Zubeldia, but he really was never much of a factor in the GC conversation, Gogo.
No, he really faltered a bit in the mountains, and sometimes that's the way it goes. This man has been in the top 10 in Grand Tours in the past, but this particular Grand Tour, things haven't gone his way, and that's the way it goes. He sits 14th right now. He's actually moving on to the new Radio Shack team next year of Lance Armstrong, so Lance certainly enjoyed racing with him this year, and enjoyed it enough to invite him on over, and Jaimar has accepted that invitation.
Now, 2 different times he's been 5th at the Tour de France. And now Alejandro Valverde wearing the golden kit for the 11th day in a row now here at the Vuelta a España. He's worn it more in the race this year than he had throughout his entire career in previous Vuelta experiences, and hoping to hold it today and tomorrow to wrap up his first ever Grand Tour victory. And he would also be the last man to ever wear the gold as the race leader. because next year it switches to red. They're making the race leader's jersey red here at the Vuelta, beginning with the 2010 edition. Ivan Basso in the green of Liquigas right now. 145 behind Valverde, third position on GC. He has Sammy Sanchez between him and Valverde, but really looking behind him more at Cadel Evans in fourth place today, trying to somehow preserve that 14-second advantage he has over the Aussie. But given their relative strengths and weaknesses between Basso and Evans, I don't know how he's going to do it. And this is Gustavo Cesar coming up to the finish. Pretty good at the second time check. Miller still leading.
And look at his time here.
Gustavo Cesar riding himself into perhaps a top 3.
A terrific ride from Gustavo Cesar. Once again, this team continues to impress me. And he's sitting currently in second spot, only one man faster than him, David Miller, as he comes to the line.
How about second place for Gustavo Cesar? 20 seconds behind a very good time of David Miller. So a winner of a stage here at the Vuelta, now a chance to perhaps be in the top 5 when it's all said and done here in the individual time trial. A guy showing the ability to put in a good performance in different ways here at the Spanish Grand Tour.
We're back now to Jaimar Zubeldia out on the road and just working his way here through this second to the last stage of this day, of this race. And, you know, we're 20th day into the race. This is stage number 20, but it's actually been 22 days since the start because like every other Grand Tour, there are 2 rest days in the middle of this 3-week event. So it actually covers 23 calendar days in total.
Now, things that make this Vuelta a little more difficult and a bit different from the ones you mentioned as we take you back to Valverde with a huge crowd around him at the start. The fact that the 2 rest days came so early. By the time we get to the end of tomorrow and the finish in Madrid, it will be 10 consecutive days of racing that the riders will have had here at the back end of this Grand Tour. That's kind of unusual.
Very unusual, and when you consider how mountainous those days were in the middle of the race and toward the end, very tough for these guys. And we continue to see guys warming up very hard. Back to our Valverde view we had just a moment ago, and we're back to now it's Zubeldia on the road. You can see his ribs through the top of his skin suit there on the white portion. That's just how lean these guys are. And you can see every breath he takes as his ribs expand. But when you think back to Valverde, who was warming up, it's really critical to have a very good warm-up so that you can start fast and feel good like Daniel Navarro here for Astana. If you're not warmed up, if you're not dripping sweat when you get into that start house, then when you first start to accelerate up to 30 miles an hour, your body starts revolting and fighting you.
Sylvester Schmid, who's done a lot of work in the mountains for Basso here at this Vuelta, most notably yesterday when he covered some attacks. Rode at the front for Liquigas on more than one occasion. Now out there by himself on the individual time trial here today. Now we've seen the likes of Zubeldia, his Astana teammate Navarro here in the last few minutes, and these are guys in the top 15 right now on the GC, and the intervals at 2 minutes between all of these riders in terms of their start positions at this stage. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. You get this late in a race and you have different ambitions for riders when you come down to this final time trial in the Grand Tour. Some guys like Zubeldia, Navarro, trying to consolidate their positions on the general classification as David Herrero comes up to the second time check at 19.5. You would imagine a Navarro and a Zubeldia trying to stay in the top 15 and maybe somehow move up into the top 10. Other guys like Valverde trying to minimize the damage in the time trial to preserve his lead. Then you have a podium battle between racers like Basso, Evans, and Sanchez behind him. And then beyond that, you have guys who really don't care about the time trial today. They're just using this as a day to go out, make it from the start to finish. They don't really care about their time. There's nothing to gain or lose. It's just about finishing for them. Yeah,
David Herrero coming through this time check, and this is a guy right here whose his entire ambition today is to try and get a top 5 in the stage, and he did that in the other time trial, coming in 4th place, and he'd like to put himself on the podium here today.
Juan Jose Cobo of the Fuji Cerveto team, winner of yesterday's stage 19, a middle mountain stage, and he was in a select group of all of the GC favorites late, sprung free from then, and was able to win.
A very smart move by him tactically when he saw the top few guys on the general classification really looking at each other and launched his own bid for the victory and took it all the way to the line.
So Zubeldia in the early portion of his ride, out on the flat, wide roads, a little bit barren in this part of Toledo. They take in both the new and the old town of Toledo during the course of the 27.8 kilometers that they ride here today. And just 70 kilometers away from Madrid, where the race will finish tomorrow. Now see how wide and easy some of these turns are out here on the course. Juan Jose Cobo, one of 10 different guys to make a stage win at this year's Vuelta, their first ever Grand Tour stage win. It's been really a remarkable run, and Cobo now on the course here in Toledo. Jaimar Zubeldia out on the course as we get down to close to the last dozen riders out on the time trial course in Toledo here today. Jaimar Zubeldia starting the stage 14th on the general classification. See if he can move up a few spots. And the standings at the first checkpoint. 10 kilometers in, Philippe Gilbert of the Silence Lotto team with the best time. David Miller, best time at the second checkpoint, 19.5 kilometers in. And David Miller right now with the best time overall at the finish as well. Now the time trial this late in a Grand Tour, Gogo, so much of it comes down to motivation. Who still has the morale to do well? Who has the legs and the mindset to put in a strong ride over today, what is just about 28 kilometers? And this man should have a lot of motivation. The Irishman, Philip Dignan, who won a stage earlier this week. Only the third Irishman to ever win a stage here at the Vuelta a España. And now, starting today, within the top 10 on the general classification. He's sitting in 9th and trying for the best finish for any Irishman in a Grand Tour in almost the last 2 decades. As we take it back out to Juan Jose Cobo of Fuji Cerveto.
He's obviously very stoked about his ride yesterday, and I think that's going to propel Juan Jose Cobo to a masterful ride here in the time trial. He certainly isn't going to vie for a podium place because this is not his discipline, but he really saved the season for this Fuji Cerveto team with that win yesterday. In fact, these guys are actually in search of a new sponsor for next year, and that will certainly help getting that massive stage win yesterday.
Better late than never. Coming down to the final 3 days of the last Grand Tour of the season for him to pull out that win. And it was a tactically savvy move. He knew that the GC contenders surrounding him in the final few kilometers wouldn't be all that concerned about him because he was over 10 minutes back. Launched a late attack and stayed away for the victory.
I really have burned in my memory the image of him winning the stage and the smile and the surprise that came over his face with Sammy Sanchez here looking for a tough defense as well right now, because he's got to be very concerned about the man from Australia, and that's Cadel Evans, who is only 33 seconds behind Sanchez in the overall classification. So there's a tough battle brewing there.
Now Sanchez did ride better than Cadel Evans in that first time trial in Valencia over a similar distance, so Sanchez can duplicate that effort. He should be able to preserve that second place position on GC. Joaquin Rodriguez, another teammate of our leader Valverde for Kesteparn. Rodriguez, a top 10 in the GC here last year at the Vuelta, comes in today sitting in 8th position, so looking for his second straight top 10 finish.
He's really been extremely helpful for Valverde over the course of this race, and Valverde will be happy to have him every single day. Unfortunately for Valverde, Rodriguez is moving teams next year. He's going over to Katusha. So that's a big blow to Kesteparn.
So just 7 guys left to start here in the individual time trial in Toledo, and that is one of them, Robert Haysink, the Dutchman. 6th on GC, 5.5 minutes back. Haysink will be out on the course as we continue here with our Stage 20 coverage on Universal Sports.
Here we go. Very big speed and a good jump. What Network.
With Todd Gogolski, I'm Steve Schlanger. We welcome you back to our Stage 20 coverage of the 2009 Vuelta a España here on Universal Sports. The individual time trial in the tourist town of Toledo. And this is the start of Lampre's Paulo Tiralongo. 7th on the general classification coming into the day. Tiralongo, part of a Lampre team that really just came to this year's Vuelta to prime their riders for the upcoming World Championships. And they admitted it. They said, we really have no serious GC ambitions. We're just here to get our guys fine-tuned for the Worlds in Switzerland. Sammy Sanchez, meanwhile, had serious Vuelta ambitions, wearing bib number 1 as the race started, currently in 2nd place and not too far away from his start. As we're back up further on the course with Juan Jose Cobo.
The Lampre squad sending home several men early in preparation for the Worlds. Damiano Cunego being one of them, also the defending world champion, and his teammate Alessandro Ballan. So they've lost those 2 guys, but they've lost a couple others as well along the way.
That is Ezequiel Mosquera, who's getting ready to go. 5th on the GC. Mosquera, not much of a time trial threat whatsoever.
This is the first time we've seen him in this jersey. This is the white jersey of the Combine jersey. And that's because, unfortunately, Robert Hesink lost that yesterday when he slipped down in the general classification. And this is the combination of the best climber, the best sprinter, and the highest man in the general classification. And it's actually led by Valverde, but Mosquera will wear it because Valverde will be in the golden jersey of the overall leader.
Well, Mosquera will start this time trial 12 seconds out of 4th place, which is where he finished in the overall last year at the Vuelta. And he's the highest returning finisher from last year's Spanish Grand Tour. Remember, the podium didn't come back for the 2009 edition. Contador, Leipheimer, and Sastre all took a pass on this year's Vuelta. So Mosquera has a chance to perhaps equal his performance of 4th place overall from a year ago. As we're back up to the finish now, David Herrero of the Jacobeo Galizia team. And the teammate of the man we just saw, Mosquera. And
looks like a solid ride.
Yeah, just like he had in Valencia. Herrero, another good time trial performance here today in Toledo. Top time of David Miller still standing.
He was 4th in that earlier time trial in stage number 7. It looks as though he is going to slip behind that, and he does, stopping the clock in 5th, but there are several fast men out on the course, so he'll probably notch down a couple more places before the day's over.
Top 5 right now, 36 minutes, 30 seconds to cover the 27.8 kilometers. Solo disparo harás 30 fotos en un segundo y siempre conseguirás la foto. Meanwhile, Cadel Evans awaits his start. A man who could pick up some serious time if he has a good ride here. 4th on the GC. Evans 1:59 back of Valverde's time overall, but just 14 seconds back of the final podium spot that right now is in the hands of Ivan Basso. Evans has to be wondering, though, had he not punctured at a critical moment in the mountains earlier in the race, where might he be? Could he perhaps be in position to use this final time trial, one of his strengths, to battle for the golden jersey? That was lost when he had that flat. Now the battle for him really is the podium. And he says that he's really made peace with what happened. He was extremely upset afterwards, the fact that he had the puncture, the neutral service car that pulled up, couldn't change his rear wheel, then spectators and photographers were blocking his team car, lost over a minute to the leaders who rode away from him, and that basically destroyed his chances of victory. Now Ezequiel Mosquera ready to roll down the start ramp next.
Mosquera is going to have a very big challenge in trying to move himself into 4th place, because even though he is only 12 seconds out of 4th, the man in 4th is Cadel Evans. And Cadel Evans is probably going to put in a scorching time trial here, trying to vault himself up at least 1 spot, if not 2 spots in the overall classification. And Mosquera really knows that the time trial is not his best discipline, and so he's probably resigned to not gaining any places today. It's really a question of whether or not he'll lose one. And if you look back, That probably won't happen either, because Robert Haysink is several minutes behind him in the general classification.
There's Haysink right now, and just ahead of Mosquera on the road. Started 2 minutes in front of the Spaniard. And as we get down to the final 5 starters now, beginning with Mosquera, a reminder at where they finished in the other individual time trial of a similar distance in Valencia. It was Sammy Sanchez among the GC favorites who had the best ride that day. He finished 18 seconds ahead of Alejandro Valverde, who of course right now is the overall race leader. Cadel Evans 3 seconds ahead of Valverde and 15 seconds behind Sammy Sanchez. Ivan Basso, meanwhile, 56 seconds behind Sanchez in stage number 7. Mosquera came in roughly a minute 20 behind Sanchez on that day. So of the remaining 4 riders, Sammy Sanchez had the best performance in stage 7. And we will see what happens here as they get set to start the final time trial in Toledo. Of course, it was Fabian Cancellara who won the time trial that day, also won the prologue, but he has since pulled out of the Vuelta this year.
You can see Cadel Evans here ready to start his race. The woman standing behind him is the person who holds everybody's saddle so that they are ready to roll on out, all clipped in.
Evans, certainly a man who could win this time trial if he puts in one of his better rides. He has those sorts of time trialing skills. Miller has set a very good time at just over 35 minutes, but Evans is one of the best when it comes to this discipline.
Well, he's won time trial events in Grand Tours before in his career. He actually comes from mountain bike racing, but he's made a huge impact on the top end of international road cycling in his career. And he is out on course now. You'll notice he has a very different position overall from David Miller, the guy who's leading the classification. His hands actually go down below his elbows. He has that's sort of the Jan Ullrich position. The German rode in that same position with low hands and the elbows up a little bit more. Personally, I think it's less aerodynamic than the position of David Miller or Levi Leipheimer, where they pick their hands up and create kind of an airfoil in the front. The issue for Evans is he feels like he doesn't get as much power if he raises his hands because he can't pull up on his hands and use the leverage against his elbows. So he goes with the low hands, and that's how he rides them. Takes a little bit less aerodynamic advantage, but generates more power.
Well, now that Evans is on the course, just 3 riders left to start: Basso, Sanchez, and Valverde. Now Cadel Evans has been through so much turmoil over the course of the last few months and came to this Vuelta on the heels of that disappointing 30th place finish at the Tour de France this year, and said that he was primarily here at the Spanish Grand Tour to gain form and fitness for the upcoming World Championships. But after the opening stages, found himself at one point just seconds back of the overall race lead. So then his focus turned to trying to win his first ever Grand Tour. Remember, he's never won one of the Grand Tours before, but that all, of course, was lost with the puncture in the mountains. Now, on the second to last day, riding for a podium, with Ivan Basso set to start 2 minutes behind Evans now.
We're really getting to the area of the bike race in the classification where there's a lot riding on this time trial. Basso only 14 seconds in front of Cadel Evans, who's a superior time trialist who's out on course. And then in front of Basso, Sammy Sanchez, 19 seconds in front of him on the general classification. Basso sitting in third coming into the day. So a big day here for Basso.
Yeah.
Either way.
You got to believe the most pressure of the top GC guys is on Ivan Basso, trying to protect a podium spot in one of his weakest disciplines against the guy who's just behind him, Cadel Evans, in one of his best disciplines. Valverde, pretty solid at the top of the standings. Sammy Sanchez, who will be next out on course, he's pretty comfortable in second. But Basso really under pressure to try and hold on to the podium now as he is on course. The golden kid of Alejandro Valverde getting ready to take the start, hoping to move within 1 day of his first ever Grand Tour win here today in Toledo. The second to last man to start today, bib number 1, 31-year-old Sammy Sanchez of Euskaltel. Trailing overall race leader Alejandro Valverde by 1:26 seconds. Sanchez in Valencia in that stage 7 time trial finished 6th on the day. Again, had the best ride among the GC contenders, and now, while it may be tough to make up that entire deficit to Valverde, he could certainly consolidate his second place position on GC with another good effort today in Toledo.
And Sanchez has really talked about the importance of this time trial and says he actually wants to come out and win this thing. He says not only does he want to try and chase down Alejandro Valverde and get closer in the general classification, but he wants to win this time trial today. And I think he has the potential of doing that. If you look at his Vuelta España a couple of years back, he actually won the final time trial, but he finished third in the general classification in that race.
That was back in 2007. Has won 5 stages here in the course of his career so far at the Vuelta, but built his entire 2009 campaign around this very race. He skipped the Giro and the Tour de France to build his season around the Vuelta and also the upcoming World Championships. Meantime, Ivan Basso further ahead, starting 2 minutes in front of Sammy Sanchez, and Basso knows this is not his strength, but he's trying to hold off that man. Cadel Evans begins the ride 14 seconds ahead of Evans in the general classification, but Evans so much better than him traditionally in the race against the clock. And now Evans a little more than 5 minutes into his ride. What is it, Gogo, that makes Evans so much better than a guy like Basso? They're obviously both top GC men in a Grand Tour, but when it comes down to the time trial, why can Evans do so much better in this discipline?
Evans is just, he's got a better focus in the time trial discipline, and he's more aerodynamic and still creating good power. And so much of the time trial is about your mindset, and it's about really putting yourself in the moment and pacing yourself perfectly, knowing exactly how hard you can go without blowing yourself up.
Last man is our leader, Alejandro Valverde.
Vamos a preparar. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The 29-year-old from the Kesteparn team in his 11th consecutive day in the overall race leader's golden jersey. Now realizing that just a solid time trial should be enough to deliver him to the victory in Madrid tomorrow. It would be his first ever victory in any Grand Tour. He's come so close here at the Vuelta before. Has been top 5 at all 4 of his previous appearances, finishing 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but never 1st.
Well, he's well on his way here on stage number 20. This is only 17.25 miles here in Toledo, and he really just has to have a decent ride here today, and he will hold that jersey.
Now that's got to be a good feeling, knowing you don't have to ride for your life, that you do have a cushion. Meantime, Cadel Evans not riding for the win, but for a podium spot here. He's been on the podium at the Tour de France, and now looking for at least a 3rd place finish here at the Vuelta in 2009. Might be tough to get up to 2nd place with Sammy Sanchez having such a time buffer over Evans, and also Sanchez such a good time trialist as we have seen this year in the Vuelta. The rides that he has put in, so he might not be able to overtake Sanchez for 2nd place, but for Evans, certainly 3rd position in the final podium spot as well within his reach.
And since we haven't seen these time trial positions or bikes for a while, you can notice a very different machine here for the time trial event. We haven't seen one since way back in stage number 7. The handlebars are different. They put their elbows on a little pad, keep their hands nice and tight. It actually sort of replicates a downhill skier's position, and that's where it was derived from. The rear wheel is a solid wheel with a fairing on it. It's called a disc wheel. A very deep rim on the front wheel with bladed spokes, and everything about it is all about aerodynamics. Also, their position is much further forward, and they're actually limited as to how far in front, or actually how close the front of the saddle can be to the bottom bracket, which is where his pedals are turning around. So a lot of regulations into this discipline, but it's all about speed and aerodynamics.
Alejandro Valverde could have very well come into this final time trial really riding for his cycling life in terms of the GC. That man, Cadel Evans, that we're looking at right now, had that tire puncture in the mountains. Had that not happened, and Evans stayed within just a few seconds the way he was at the time that he flatted, and let's say this final day, Evans and Valverde were just separated by 5, 6, 7 seconds, Valverde would have been scared out of his mind and really would have had to try to put in the time trial of his life. But today he doesn't really have to worry about Evans because he has so much of a cushion because of those circumstances we've documented.
Well, and the Evans gap to Valverde is 1:59, but Evans actually lost 1 minute and 8 seconds on that day to the Sierra Nevada when he had that puncture, and he actually lost over that much time waiting for his bike, gained some of it back before the finish. But even by his own admission, Alejandro Valverde coming into this time trial said he is a bucket of nerves, and he has really had a hard time keeping himself sort of chilled out. Imagine if Evans were breathing down his neck in the overall classification. That would have really been tough on him.
Well, when you come to a discipline like this, where it's so much about just pure power and motivation, how do nerves play a role? How do they manifest themselves in a rider's performance?
Everybody takes it differently, and some guys, if they get really concerned, they actually will have a worse performance. You'll see guys crashing in time trials. You'll see them starting out too hard and blowing up. You'll see them making big mistakes that really cost them. Other guys, they really rise to the occasion. And a guy like Evans actually does pretty well. When he is challenged in a time trial, he tends to rise to the occasion.
Well, Sammy Sanchez right now riding a few seconds faster than Alejandro Valverde. Sanchez on the left, Valverde on the right. Well, no surprise right now, and for Valverde, this margin that we're seeing won't be much of a concern for him. Again, he can concede some seconds.
Yeah, these guys are fairly evenly matched in the time trial discipline. Certainly Sanchez, we expect him to ride just a little bit better than Valverde in this time trial, but you never know, because Valverde does have really the benefit and quite often the big motivation that comes along with that of wearing the golden jersey of the race leader. And we have seen time and time again in bike races around the world where the guy who is leading the bike race overall, whether it's the Giro d'Italia, whether it's the Vuelta a España, whether it's the Tour de France, whether it's any other race, they will ride at a level higher than they normally do because they are motivated like that.
Now, Cadel Evans certainly should be motivated today to try and move up from his current 4th position to at least a top 3 and get on the podium. Got to wonder what goes through the mind of this rider at times. Thought he would be fired on the final day of the Tour de France after such a disappointing performance, and his team really calling him out, saying that he basically just psychologically blew up. And Evans has looked back at the Tour and says he still doesn't really know what went wrong. And we've seen him manifest his temper here at this year's Vuelta at various times. And he's sort of at that point in his career where you start to say, all right, you got to fish or cut bait. Are you going to finally break through and win a Grand Tour? Are you going to be a perpetual runner-up? What's going to happen to a guy like Cadel Evans? Well, getting back onto a podium, even though he's not winning at this year's Vuelta, would certainly be a nice bounce back considering his 30th at the Tour de France. Certainly not the result he wanted, but considering what's happened so far to him this season, a top 3 might be a sigh of relief for the Aussie.
Well, and if you look at Valverde, he never won a Grand Tour, and he's coming into this day now in that jersey and looking like he may win his first one. So anything's possible in Cadel Evans' further career.
Sammy Sanchez, the 31-year-old Spaniard, rolling through the time trial right now in Toledo. Race leader Alejandro Valverde was unable to ride both the Giro and the Tour this year because of a racing ban in Italy for his ongoing doping investigation. And the Tour de France passed onto Italian roads this year, and that's why he was forced to miss out on each of the first 2 Grand Tours this season. But now here he is back at the final Grand Tour, his home Grand Tour, and looking for his first ever win. He's won 5 stages at the Vuelta before, but never finished on the top step of the podium. And Sammy Sanchez, another guy who's won 5 stages here at the Vuelta throughout his career, and looks like he's pretty safe to finish on the podium today. Meantime, Cadel Evans coming up and going through that first intermediate checkpoint at 10 kilometers and 3 spots removed from Philippe Gilbert.
Well, Gilbert had an extremely fast first segment, but let's also remember that Gilbert is Cadel Evans' teammate. So then when he finishes, he gives valuable feedback to Evans and to the rest of the staff just to give an idea about the course, how it felt, what maybe you could do. Can you take this corner at full speed? Every little thing, Evans puts that in the hopper and he uses it out there on the road.
Then he'll say, just don't slow down like I did over the last 2/3 of the course.
Exactly.
This is Basso, meantime, just ahead of Cadel Evans. Started 2 minutes in front of him with a 14-second difference between these 2 riders for 3rd and 4th on GC. Basso 3rd, Evans 4th as the day started. And Ivan a little over 12 minutes into his ride. And you got to wonder about the future for Basso. Of course, this was his comeback year following the 2-year suspension. First rode the Giro in May, skipped the Tour de France to specifically refocus his training to the Vuelta. Doesn't have any ambitions about the World Championships next week. The second half of his season built entirely around the Spanish Grand Tour, and may not get on the podium here. So we'll have to see about what happens to him in 2010. Second checkpoint for Juan Jose Cobo now.
Well, Juanjo still fighting inside that top 10 in the second time check here, and he's really not a time trialist. He's a man who's out here just riding on inspiration from his stage win yesterday. And he slipped now to 14th, 15th position at this time check. So he really is just trying to hold on to his top 10 in the overall classification. Now, one guy who is a little bit vulnerable is the man who is just in front of him in the general classification, and that's Philip Dijknen. Dijknen sitting in 9th place, just over a minute in front. So there's a bit of a general classification battle there between those two guys.
Basso, look at that. 11th position at the first interval, 44 seconds back of Gilbert's time. So he's lost significant time in only the first 10K of racing. We'll have another checkpoint at 19.5 kilometers.
Of course, Gilbert's time not so critical to Basso, but what he is going to be concerned about is the men that are coming behind him in the general classification. Sammy Sanchez, and also the man who just went through in front of him, Cadel Evans. Evans was 33 seconds behind Gilbert, so he was about 11 seconds faster than Basso in that first time check.
And right now, Sanchez and Valverde, last two riders in the course, riding at just about a comparable clip, it seems. Valverde looking pretty good. Said he was nervous ahead of the ride today, but really not showing it, doing exactly what he needs to do to keep his grip on the golden kit, the Mayo Oro.
And though the time trial is really not his discipline, Valverde should not have any major problems because he has such a big advantage, almost a minute and 30. Cadel Evans out here on the course, and these hills are actually pretty challenging. They're not super long, but you can see the grade here, 8%, and it even goes up to 9% in places. Evans out of the saddle, really rocking the bike there, because he knows that if he settles in too much on this climb, he can lose time. So he's going to punch it up the hill and go a little bit into the red, and then try and get a little recovery once he hits the top.
This is Sanchez at the first interval, 40 seconds back of Gilbert's time. So standings as Sammy Sanchez goes through there. First checkpoint, Gilbert still holding on to the best time, and only one more rider to pass through. That'll be Alejandro Valverde.
So Sanchez a few seconds faster than Basso as well, and in the first time trial back in stage 7, Sanchez did beat Valverde, but only by 18 seconds. So that's why Valverde doesn't have too much to be concerned about today.
Now Cadel Evans cresting the climb, and now back into the time trial position here. Now, all the time trials we've seen at this year's Vuelta, pretty flat for the most part. Nothing like the Cinque Terre time trial we saw back at the Giro this year, and where it was long and very mountainous. The 3 races against the clock, prologue and 2 TTs here at this year's Vuelta, mostly flat. A couple of them were on motocross circuits to give you an indication of how pancake flat they were.
That's right. Looking at that first time check, back to Sanchez and Evans. Evans has gained 7 seconds on Sammy Sanchez, but he needs 33 seconds to move all the way up into second place in front of Sammy Sanchez. So it's going to be a tough haul for Evans to get that much time.
Yeah, more realistic to pick off Basso in front of him for Cadel Evans. Alejandro Valverde has the benefit of all the time checks as the last rider on the course now.
He'll be getting that information, Steve, through his radio in his ear. He's got a little earbud, talks with the team manager back in the car. They give him all the information, plus quite a bit of, well, just plain old motivational conversation. They try and say things to him that they think make him go faster. And they also tell him a lot about the course as well.
So now with everybody going through the 10-kilometer checkpoint, Gilbert will see his time stand up at that point on the course. Meantime, Ivan Basso trying to maintain his advantage, hold on to third place up the road. And the virtual general classification at the first checkpoint looks like this. So Valverde preserving a lot of his time. But look at that. The gap from Basso to Evans, only 3 seconds. So Cadel, as we anticipated, making up time on the podium right now.
I'm sure he anticipated it as well, Steve. And he's going to see if he can chase down Sammy Sanchez and move all the way up to the second step of the podium. Basso here making the left into that climb that we just saw Cadel Evans on at the bottom, and here he is back closer to the top. These guys starting at 2-minute intervals here in this last 10 of the general classification. You can see all the sweat running off of Cadel Evans' nose, his chin. It's only in the mid-70s. This guy is going extremely hard, and these aerodynamic teardrop-shaped helmets don't have much ventilation. They have just a little bit of ventilation, but it's a fine line between ventilation and resistance, and so they really make them pretty smooth, and they're pretty hot.
Now the one big climb on the day, if you can call it that, comes just prior to 20 kilometers into the race. It lasts for 2 kilometers, and the average gradient is just under 6%. We've already seen Evans going up beyond 6%, up to 8 and 9% on the slopes.
This is a big opportunity for Evans here to win a stage, even though he had the big misfortune of getting the puncture back in stage 13. Because he hasn't had a stage win yet, he'd certainly like to win the time trial here today.
Part of Old Town Toledo on this part of the race course. Ivan Basso followed closely by the team car, losing time to Cadel Evans behind him. I should say Cadel Evans in front of him. Basso trailing Evans out on the course.
That's right, so Basso actually gets the better option of getting the more up-to-date information than Cadel Evans does, but Cadel Evans knows that he's gaining time regardless. He feels pretty certain at this point, I'm sure, that he's going to displace Basso, and he's really thinking about Sammy Sanchez.
Yeah, Cadel Evans behind Basso on the GC, but ahead of him on the road right now.
Like they do in every time trial in these stage races across the world, the first rider to start is the guy in last place on the overall, and the last guy to start is the guy in first place overall. So if the weather changes, if it starts raining, various things happen, you're always grouped with the guys that are the closest together in the overall. You can see here Valverde, a 10-second deficit only to Sammy Sanchez right now. He comes into the day with a 1:26 advantage.
I'll probably realize he would give up a few seconds, if not more, so this is still well within the margin of error for Alejandro Valverde. Now conditions the same for all the riders today. Not a drop of rain out on the course. Comfortable temperatures right around 70 degrees. And a lot of the Spanish fans cheering one of their favorites, Alejandro Valverde. They want him to hold that golden jersey and get that elusive Grand Tour win.
A lot of big fans there for Sammy Sanchez as well, sitting in second place in the overall and looking very good in this time trial, I have to say.
It'll be quite a moment for Spain, provided that Valverde does hang on and win this Vuelta, as Robert Haysink comes up to the second time check, and the time trial certainly not his strong suit, as you see how far back he is, measured by the best time of David Miller, who went through a 26:06. But if Valverde hangs on, wins the Vuelta, you will have Alberto Contador, another Spaniard, as the winner of the Tour de France, and arguably the best Grand Tour stage racer in the world right now, sitting at the top of the sport. You still have Sammy Sanchez, the reigning Olympic road race champion. So Spanish cycling, in more ways than one, in a very good position right now, here coming to the end of the 2009 season.
Well, they've been the #1 ranked country for a reason, because of their incredible performances at the top of the world stage. And Cadel Evans here really trying to get that win in this stage. Remember, we don't have Fabian Cancellara, who won both of the other time trials. David Miller was second in the stage 7 time trial, and Bert Gropsch, also not here, was third in that time trial. So it's a big opportunity for Evans and Miller, probably the couple of best time trials here as well. But don't discount Sammy Sanchez. He was 6th in the time trial back in stage number 7, and he has won the final time trial of the Vuelta before in his career back in 2007.
Now, we focused a lot of our attention on the top 5 on GC because those are the only guys within 2 minutes of the overall race lead. But coming into this second to last day of this 3-week race, none of those riders have won a stage so far in this year's Vuelta.
Well, it goes to show you what consistency will get you. This looks like Juan Jose Cobo coming to the line, and he is currently sitting in the 10th spot as he drives hard, following his terrific victory yesterday with that 3-kilometer solo in, breaking away from the 8 riders he was with and riding in for a narrow victory.
So Cobo, a little over 37 minutes in the saddle here today, and top 20 for the Fuji Cerveto rider.
16th spot, good solid ride for the Spaniard.
Meantime, Cadel Evans,
Look at
it
this.
looks like about to pass Ezequiel Mosquera, who started 2 minutes ahead of him.
Well, it's not to be really a big surprise in this event. Mosquera, not known for his time trialing. He's really known as pretty much a climbing specialist, and has really shown his climbing legs throughout this Grand Tour, in spite of the fact that he's had a couple of nasty crashes. Back in Liège, he had a bad crash in Belgium, really hurting his ankle. Took him a couple days to bounce back, and then he had that nasty crash a couple days ago when Haysink also crashed, and he got a bit of a concussion as well.
And Cadel Evans coming up on the second checkpoint, 19.5 kilometers in, well into that big climb on the course. And Cadel Evans second best to David Miller, only 5 seconds off the leader's pace right now.
Oh, Evans is starting to pick it up. He wasn't so fast through the first time check, but then again, neither was Miller. In fact, it was Cadel Evans a second in front of David Miller on the first time check.
Cadel Evans has passed his 2-minute man here. On the second half of this Toledo time trial course, is David Miller's best time at the finish within Evans' sights right now? Might he squeeze out a stage win here in stage 20? Cadel Evans really going for it, it looks like, and the Silent Lotto riders salvage something here on the second to last day of the Vuelta. We come back to Toledo. This is the individual time trial on stage number 20. Steve Schlanger, Todd Gogolski here on Universal Sports. That is Ivan Basso, the only rider left in the field to have won a Grand Tour in his career. Of course, it was 3 years ago. He took the Giro d'Italia, now riding his first ever Vuelta a España at the end of 2009, and he is losing time out there on the course.
He comes into the day with a 14-second advantage over Cadel Evans in the first time check. Evans had already gained most of that back. Basso now climbing toward the second time check, Steve, and we'll see where he stops the clock. But Evans has already been through there, and Evans was 5 seconds behind David Miller on that time check.
Now Basso really riding to gain leverage with his team for next year. Franco Pelizzotti already stating he wants to be the captain for Liquigas going into the Giro d'Italia next year, and says that he'll support Basso at the Tour de France if they can work out that arrangement. But Basso finishing 5th in the Giro this year in his comeback season, now maybe off the podium at the Vuelta. It's going to be interesting to see where Liquigas management sees this rider fitting in next year as he comes up on that second checkpoint, and I'll see how much time is slipping away for the Italian.
He doesn't look particularly fast going up this climb, Steve, and as we said earlier in the broadcast, this tends to be his Achilles heel. He's been out of competition for 2 years. He's come back this year, and he seems to have lost just a little bit more of the edge. And the time trial was never his favorite discipline, and I think it's becoming even less favorite of a discipline for him now.
Well, as those places slip away, Basso will finally go through the 19.5 kilometer interval, 46 seconds slower than David Miller, who was fastest through there. So that puts Cadel Evans as the virtual third place rider on the road right now. So moving himself up into the podium.
My calculation says 41 seconds Basso has lost to Cadel Evans. Now this man, Sammy Sanchez, comes into the day 33 seconds in front of Cadel Evans. So we'll see where he stops the clock at the second time check. This is second place on the podium right now in the overall classification. On the right side of your screen, Alejandro Valverde way out of reach for even the best time trial at this point Cadel Evans could have up in first place.
And Valverde going to stay out front of Sammy Sanchez as well, it looks like. Well, again, using the yardstick of the Stage 7 time trial in Valencia, Sammy Sanchez was better than Cadel Evans on that day. Sanchez finished 6th. It was Evans 10th. And Sanchez had 19.5 kilometers. He'll be the second to last man to go through there. Remember, it was Evans a few moments ago, just 5 seconds slower than Miller's time, who you see right there at 26:06.
Sanchez knowing a lot riding here, not only in the general classification, but he really came into this looking for a stage win. He's slipped now to third spot as he crosses, 11 seconds down, so he's lost 6 seconds to the Australian, Cadel Evans.
But now within 10 kilometers of the finish line, Sanchez should be able to preserve that margin the rest of the way.
It's all about pacing here. We'll see who is doing the better job of that. And really, if we look back to the Stage 7 time trial, Cadel Evans having one of the worst showings I've ever seen him have in a Grand Tour time trial. 10th place, losing a minute 2 to Fabian Cancellara. And even Sammy Sanchez beating him by a good portion of over 10 seconds. So Sanchez now not getting quite as good a ride compared to Evans, but Valverde here with a big buffer, 1 minute 26 seconds back to Sammy Sanchez in the overall standings.
Alejandro Valverde over 25 minutes into his effort now. For a time trial today that's taken a little over half an hour for most of the riders, and Cadel Evans now 31 minutes into his adventure, motoring along here. You will know that he is moving himself up the standings in the general classification, but how far up? Is it just going to be that one spot to third behind Valverde and Sanchez? That looks like it's going to be the case with the road running out. And Sammy Sanchez doing enough to hold on to his lead, even though he did concede a few seconds to Evans at the second time check.
A really good ride by Sanchez, only 6 seconds back of Evans at that second time check. That comes at 19.5 kilometers, and they only have 27.8 to get to the finish line. So barring some sort of a spectacular blow-up of Sammy Sanchez or a puncture or a mishap, he probably will hold on to second place in the overall.
Alejandro Valverde, last man to come up on the second interval here. Even going slightly uphill, still tucked into the aero position.
Valverde was a few seconds behind Sanchez in the first time check. And we've seen that slip a little bit further back down here now. And we will see at 26 seconds behind Miller, but the critical element here is the time between him and Sammy Sanchez. Sanchez 11 seconds behind David Miller.
Now you see it right there, so still quite a buffer for Alejandro Valverde. Big margin for him to work with. 126 was the gap on GC as the day began from Valverde to Sanchez, and holding on to a lot of that right now. Robert Haysink, meanwhile, from Rabobank, coming up to the finish. His Vuelta podium dreams disappearing a few days ago in a horrible crash that required 8 stitches in his left knee. Forced him to suffer the last few days in the middle mountains. Cost him his podium in several minutes as he started the day 5.5 minutes back on the GC. And he'll be outside the top 20 in the time trial today in what never was one of his strong suits to begin with.
It really isn't, and he even said after the day yesterday he wasn't even sure he was going to be racing today. And it looks like he is racing, but he was 28th in the time trial back in Stage 7, so an actually somewhat similar performance there, but that one was pan flat. He should have done better in this one if he hadn't crashed.
Of course, that was that crash on that extremely flat transitional stage that caught Haysink and Mosquera, knocked them both down. Now the virtual general classification after 2 intervals. Valverde still with a lead of over a minute to Sanchez. Cadel Evans, as we talked about, has moved up a spot into 3rd ahead of Ivan Basso, who's dropped to 4th. Now Valverde, who despite not racing the 2 previous Grand Tours this season, has still had a very good year in 2009. He won the Dauphiné Libéré, the Tour of Catalunya, and the Burgos race. So several wins on his resume here in this calendar year, and has just a few kilometers left to go to the finish of the time trial now.
One thing you have to say about Alejandro Valverde is that he is a prolific winner in bike racing, almost 60 career victories as a professional, and we're talking a lot of big races at the top of the calendar. But he's never won the Olympic road race like this man, Sammy Sanchez, has, and this is the battle between these 2 guys. Sanchez going for the stage win here. Looks as though it may have slipped through his fingers, but he has not given up yet.
Now Cadel Evans also pedaling ferociously here as he tries to secure that final podium spot. Now Evans coming up to the line. Remember, just 5 seconds behind David Miller at the 2nd checkpoint on the course. He's going to go outside of Miller at the finish line, but he's going to be extremely close to the best time of the day so far. The Aussie Cadel Evans, 9 seconds back, and he's in 2nd position.
A great ride by Australian Cadel Evans, but probably a little disappointing. He would have loved to have gotten a stage win here, and so far, David Miller is the only man on top of him.
Could be enough, though, for that final podium, considering what we've seen out on the road. Evans gaining time on Basso. Evans also passed his 2-minute man, Ezequiel Mosquera, who started ahead of him. Zeke never been a good time trialist, and look how far back he is. Hard to believe that until the prologue of this year's Vuelta 3 weeks ago, he hadn't ridden a time trial of any kind all season. And really showing it here. 61st on the day, losing almost 3 minutes.
He is so bandaged up
as
well.
Ivan Basso. Now Basso looking like he's almost resigned to losing his podium.
Well, you really get a good picture here with the aerodynamic helmet, that teardrop shape right down on the back, the skin suit, which actually is slipperier than a traditional jersey, and it has like dimply fabric to hold air on it so that the air slides over the air instead of air sliding over the fabric.
Now just 3 riders left to finish now. Basso, Sanchez, and Valverde, as Sammy goes inside of the final 2K.
You go down a little further to their feet, and they all have little booties or shoe covers on, and these are really not for warmth, they're for aerodynamics. We saw them wearing them for warmth in some days of this race. In fact, yesterday guys were wearing them for warmth, a little bit thicker ones.
Alejandro Valverde, 4 kilometers away. Now he's not going to let up, but he'll know what the time checks are, and he will realize that he is inching ever closer to holding that golden jersey for good. His 11th straight day in the Mayo Oro here today. Tomorrow will make it an even dozen as they go into Madrid to end the final Grand Tour of the season.
And before yesterday's stage, Valverde saying he was 70% of the way to winning this race overall. Before today's stage, he says he's up to 90, but it's not over yet. Ivan Basso here, getting pretty close to the end for the Italian.
A little climb up before the finish. And Basso losing time to Cadel Evans. Remember, it's Evans who has the 2nd best time at the finish line to David Miller, who's first. And now Basso looks like slipping outside the top 10. But more importantly, losing that podium spot to the Aussie from Silence Lotto. Ivan Basso, in his first ever Vuelta a España, in the final time trial, will finish 103 back of Miller. And that'll be enough to lose his podium to Evans right now. So it'll be the 3rd and 4th positions on GC flip-flopping, it looks like, with Evans moving from 4th to 3rd and Ivan Basso going the other way.
Got to be a huge disappointment for Basso. Man, struggling to regain that fitness that he had when he won the Giro d'Italia. Back here to Sammy Sanchez now. He's had a very good ride here, and you can tell by the reaction of the fans, he's a very popular man in Spain.
Second to last man on the course. Coming up to the finish now, 31-year-old Spaniard Sammy Sanchez of the Euskaltel team. Highest finish ever in the Vuelta a España for him, third back in 2007. Looking to secure his second on GC here today. And it looks like he is going to do that as he hits the finish line in the time trial, 5 seconds back of first place and in second to David Miller.
Besting Cadel Evans, a phenomenal ride by Sammy Sanchez. He has been really time trialing well at this year's Vuelta.
Looks back at his time, saying he just missed it. And now the last man out on the road, Alejandro Valverde.
He's probably starting to be able to taste that sweet taste of victory now, not in the time trial, but in the overall. He's getting the time splits from his team management. They have people out on course at several places. In addition to the official time checks, he knows exactly where he stands. He knows he's lost a little time to Sammy Sanchez, but not enough to make a big difference.
Valverde, the 29-year-old, who's never finished outside the top 5 at the Vuelta a España. Just about to put the final squeeze on the top step of the podium here today. He won't win this time trial, but he will more than preserve the margin to keep him in the overall race lead going to the final stage tomorrow, which is the ceremonious parade into the Spanish capital of Madrid.
Valverde and Sanchez will both be looking forward to the World Championships as well, as they have very good form 1 week before the Worlds.
Well, he's had the doping cloud hanging over him for a long time. Thought he might not even get to ride the Vuelta if a worldwide ban were to come down before this race, but the decision has been put off until after the Vuelta, so he is free and clear now and riding ever closer to winning his first ever Grand Tour in his home Grand Tour, the Vuelta a España. Alejandro Valverde, final little climb coming into the straight-in run to the finish at the individual time trial in Toledo. Valverde has put in a very good effort here today. Alejandro Valverde, fist raised to the Spanish faithful. He knows it now. The Spaniard, 36 seconds off on the day, but pulling on the golden jersey, it looks like for good here on the second to last day of the race.
Alejandro Valverde basically ices the position at the top of the podium in his time trial here.
Ah, senor, it's all but in the bag now for AVV. Valverde, the leader after the time trial here at the Vuelta.
The 2009 Vuelta a España has been brought to you by AT&T, your world delivered. And by MGD64, a tasty contradiction.
It was Garmin Slipstream's David Miller who rode early today, posted the best time, and it stood up all day long in stage 20 as he wins the individual time trial in Toledo. He said this was a focus for him in the final week. He wanted the win really badly, and he got it.
He didn't only get that, he got the big sword here on the podium, Steve.
Well, Toledo, a town pretty famous for its production of iron and especially swords. And it's David Miller who put the dagger in the field here today as he picks up Garmin Slipstream's third stage win at this race alone. Remember, rider Hejdahl won a stage, and so did Tyler Farah for this Garmin team.
I'm a little disappointed he's not holding that sword over his head, posing with it.
Of all the things you can get on the podium, I tell you what, a sword has to be one of the coolest. I mean, the champagne is pretty much standard.
Here we go.
Sometimes, though, they give you funky hats. I'd much prefer the sword.
That'll look nice over the mantle, won't it?
So he gets the champagne now from the podium girls. And David Miller, who celebrated time trial wins before in his career. This is nothing unusual, and he's well adjusted to getting that cork off and spraying the crowd. So Miller wins the time trial, but the big winner on the day, Alejandro Valverde, galvanizing his position at the top of the GC with only one stage left to go. Now leading Sammy Sanchez by 55 seconds. Everybody else over a minute back, and with just the parade into Madrid to go tomorrow, Valverde realizing that his place is pretty secure.
Yeah, with a great performance in the top 10, and it really didn't matter that much. All he didn't want to do is lose time to Sanchez and Evans, and he only lost a little. Now
the 29-year-old Spaniard conceded a little time, as he suspected he would, but has enough of a margin to make tomorrow's race into Madrid relatively uneventful. Nobody's going to be attacking. The margin is too great, and Valverde realizes that he can smile now. He'll pull on the golden jersey for another day, and tomorrow will be the 12th day in a row for the overall leader in gold.
Well, we'll see if Andre Greipel can pick up yet another field sprint win for Colombia HTC tomorrow, stage 21.
So a big day for Alejandro Valverde, and all that's left is stage number 21. Make sure you join us tomorrow. In the meantime, for Todd Gogolski and all of us at Universal Sports, I'm Steve Schlanger. We will see you tomorrow as Valverde gets to celebrate in Madrid.